Welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 241, we welcome special guest, Reverend Dr. Temple Hayes. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm the host. I'm also lovingly known as RCA, and I'm here today in 818 Studios with a dear friend and my producer. So welcome.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey. And as always, I want to welcome you to a brand new week. And here, the last Monday of January. Can't believe we're already. It's almost February, and the time absolutely flies by. It feels like just yesterday was October.
Yeah, it does. It does, kind of.
Doesn't it?
Well, and of course in Orlando, we have, 3 days of winter. Anyway, well, we want to introduce our guest. We have Temple Hayes is here. I mean, I have known Temple for many years, and I want you to get to know her because she is, in fact, a global spiritual leader, difference maker. She's always been a mover and a shaker, and it's about moving and shaking what? Spiritual consciousness, right? Helping people change their lives and therefore the world for the better. So we are thrilled to have Temple joining us today. And I want to say not from Florida where we first met, but all the way from California. So welcome, Temple Hayes. Glad to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Anywhere you show up and wherever you're playing, I'm going to put on my t-shirt because we connect in such a deep way that's quite refreshing, actually.
Oh, it is. It is. We've been on quite a journey together because both of us, Temple, as you know, are ministers. We're ordained through Unity, and yet our ministries are, you're also a religious science man, or I guess science of mind. And we have been, though, playing in a bigger arena than just a physical building, than just a church, even though there's nothing less about that. You and I have always been seeking to reach a larger audience. And I think this recent move for you has been a big part of that. So why don't you, as our listeners are getting to know you, why don't you tell us where you are right now, kind of what you're up to? Because you've had a lot of great stuff going on the last few months.
Well, it just shows the spiritual path, right? And the spiritual path is listening and being in tune with oneself. And as you know, I pretty much with my wife had planned to live the rest of my life in St. Petersburg, Florida. And within 8 weeks, I had 8 people tell me that you are relocating to Santa Barbara, Florida. California. See, I still have it in my brain.
I love it. Right.
But that you're going to California, and I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? And just it was so obvious that was what was being called to do. And you know as well as I know that we don't question those things because otherwise we have to change careers. If I'm telling people to listen and follow the messages, I obviously must do it myself. So we've been here 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
8 months, and it's been amazing. And many doors continue to open up. And like you were saying, I mean, to me, I love talking to the people that already understand the unity principles or the science of mind principles. But it's going to the places where people are in recovery or they're in addiction or they're in different programs in their lives. And recently, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I was invited to be the only actress, but the main narrator for a musical called Yogananda Dance about the life of Yogananda.
Beautiful.
And so that I did that this past year in November at the Biltmore Hotel. I can't believe it's 2023 either. But the whole thing for me is that people go, well, where's this going to lead? Where is it going to lead? I go, I don't know. I'm attached to doing the best I can because I've never done this before as a narration and to memorize per cue 30 minutes of information. But that being said, I'm detached to where it goes. And, that's a path that we learn, isn't it?
Yes. And I want to pause and say, you're saying so many important things right now about the spiritual journey, just in the telling of this story. And I want to just slow it down for our listeners and for myself so I make sure we're not missing it. Because, first of all, the move was huge because not only did you have a home, your family, your mom, a lot of people you loved were in Florida. I mean, right? Your whole community.
Oh, yeah.
And you were a tremendous part of that. So when you were really willing, because we talk so much on this show about listening to your guidance and moving forward, and here you're saying, well, of course I did it. And I want to say, yes, of course you did, but it will inspire people to hear like this was a major unplug right from here. And it was a huge leap of faith. And I think when you live at the level that you have been for such a long time, which is listening to that inner voice and following it, that you had a real peace about the move, even though the ego didn't, quote, know what was next, right? Like, what are you going to do out there? And I remember when we talked, people would say, well, what are you going to do out there? And you're like, I'm not sure. And then here you've been busy. As we'd say down south, you've been as busy as a one-armed paper hanger. I'm sure that's not PC anymore to say, but the idea is, since you've been there, you have not been lacking opportunity. It was absolutely divine order. So why don't you talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, that process of, getting there, because it's got to be discernment every single day that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this is the part that people often forget, is that, walking through the shadow and walking through the change, no one said it was easy. But what is hard is not trusting spirit. And when you have enough experiences, a short story is that I was taking a group of people to Brazil. We were leaving like 3 weeks from the date. I might have told you this. And we were leaving to go to Brazil and all set. And I gather them together and I say, I'm not going. What do you mean you're not going? I said, I got the strongest message that I am not to go. And they were getting very aggravated. People talk about divine order and listening until you actually go to do it. And then that's something else. And I said,
Right.
Look, how could you honor a spiritual leader if I don't listen to myself? That's what I teach. And the plane left. And that evening, the former minister at my community, who is my very good friend, his wife died. And I was able to be there for him every step of the way. So we have enough of those things about trust, right? That show us that there's a reason. And when you have 8 people tell you, and 4 of them I had never met in my life. But to break it down for you, the goodbye is, it's like we say, finding the good in goodbye. You understand that some people just aren't comfortable with goodbye. There are people that never spoke to me again. You left us like I was a mad mom or something. You
the
learn
parent role,
different levels of saying goodbye. You learn how to prune, how to let go of things that were more superficial. And it's a 10-hour show of just the process of the journey, right?
Right. Well, and I think this is all super important. And, I think for all of us, you did have to deal with, as any leader does, a great deal of projection from the people you served, from what people want you to be. And mostly people don't have a clue who we really are. They see us as they want to see us. And again, the maturity on the spiritual journey is pretty important in terms of being able to navigate through that. Because when people expect us to do things, when they're putting, the parent role on us, this is classic family systems theory, and our work is just to transmute and transcend the projections and do a spirit guides. And, if we could all do that in our lives and in the world, what a better world it would be.
That's the truth. That's for sure. And the beauty of this experience has been, it's one thing to make major changes in the midst of everything that feels familiar. It's,
Yes,
I
yes.
think, much easier to make changes in your life when very little is familiar. And to have an empty canvas for me and for BB, just to come here and
Mhm,
just paint what we want to see.
mhm.
It's really been fascinating because then you feel like you're really choosing everything that's coming
Yes.
into your calendar, everything that's coming into your life. That's my new thing, is the new form of victimization in our society, even those that are quote unquote evolved, is their calendar. They
Oh, you're
forgot
right.
that they have any say in it whatsoever.
It's
Let me
like
be a victim. Oh my gosh, I'm so busy. I'm such a martyr. I'm so important. It's like, what?
well, that's exactly my last couple of years in my ministry in Orlando, I realized I kept saying, I'm so busy, I'm so busy. And I'm like, but wait, I put all these things on there. Like I finally started hearing myself. And so there's something very important too, yes, about that, what you're saying as well, is like, let's be empowered, friends. We're not a victim to the calendar. We mostly is self-created. Certainly we have responsibilities, but every choice is in fact a choice. Everything on that calendar is a choice. And what I've seen in your journey, as you've made this big move, is I know there's been a big opening up of your heart. I feel like you being able to choose has given you a great freedom, because when you are a leader of a thriving community, which you certainly were at First Unity in St. Petersburg, Florida, you built, I mean, it was a 7-day a week ministry with programs and leaders and people coming and going. And pretty soon it's easy to have the ministry running you, even though you had great boundaries and you were always
Mhm.
doing your spiritual work. I think it was an important pivot to say, well, what do I really want to be doing now? And I think for all of us, depending on our life stage, especially certain life stages, we have these like windows of opportunity to make these choices. And I think this was a wonderful, empowered choice. And I can see it by your lightness, by your happiness, and by the opportunities, that are coming forward. Like the Yoganan dance is a great example of a wonderful opportunity that, of course, you had no idea, right, was happening until
Mhm.
after you moved.
Yes. Well, as much as you've taught through the years, and as much as I have, the beauty of
Mm.
spirituality is we're not in an aquarium. Rather than talking about who I've been, I'm much more excited to talk about who I am emerging into, you know.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what's beautiful when you have this spiritual relocation, as I
Mhm.
talk about in my book, When
Mhm.
Did You Die? It's a spiritual relocation because I was
Right,
very
right, right.
comfortable and
Oh, yeah.
very put. But when you have this kind of thing happen, then
Mhm.
it's like you you're showing up as you,
Yes.
without any influence of what are people feeling or thinking. And
Yeah.
even though you're not the kind of person, I've not been that kind of person for a long time. I always say if everybody likes you, you're really probably not doing very much. So I
Right.
mean, I get that in public life,
Yes.
and but coming in a brand new area, and I think I needed to see that too because of the skills and stuff that I've taught other leaders, and with the institute that I have that
Yes.
develops spiritual leaders.
Mm.
I teach certain things, and I think for me it's been great to come to another unity here and apply those same principles that I
Yes.
applied 15 years ago. They've tripled in size. It's the talk of the town. Those kind of principles, like we say, they still work. And
Yes.
that's been a wonderful thing for me to, I feel like if I tagged myself now, I would call myself a spiritual comedian.
That
Because
is awesome.
I'm really developing my greater sense of humor out loud.
I think that is awesome. Well, and you're also developing, I think, just from our conversations, what you've shared with me, it's your journey's also gone so deep. It's like deep and wide, and I think the deeper and more self-aware you become, the more spiritually aligned and attuned that you become, that you can laugh at life. You can be vulnerable. You can know you don't have to always be in self-protection mode, that people are going to say things. You're going to even have feelings that you can't even take seriously because they're going to change in 5 minutes. So,
Yeah.
So some of your, shamanic work that you've done, that deep, deep work that it's really hard to even have words for. I think that's also huge, is playing a huge impact on your life right now and the choices that are coming your way. It's like the blessing of all that you gave for so many years, you're now receiving. Because as a minister in the field, as how I think of it, when we're in churches, you give and give and give and give. And at some point as the leader, you have to really be in a receive mode. You have to get your feeding. You have to take care of you and go deeper so that you do have something to give. So I'm kind of jealous of this new community because they're getting the benefit of all your deep experience, but then also these new awarenesses that you say are still happening. They're still coming forward.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the best thing that happened at 38 years old for me, after 9 years at the time sobriety, was the feeling that I was dying. And I literally had the feeling I'm dying. And I think some people misunderstand that. They take it in the physical sense. For me, it was the spiritual sense. I think a lot of teenagers today, they get the message they're going to die. It means that they're going to be resurrected to who they are really intended to be. But I had been in metaphysics. I was born metaphysical like you. And actually going to metaphysical buildings, was more confusing than just innately being a metaphysical person, because it was mostly of the head and conceptual, versus the depth like you're talking about. And I think for everybody, that concept change your thinking, change your life. I think your life changes very quickly in the beginning. But then you see that your life and other people's lives really haven't changed that much because the depth isn't there.
The depth
and
isn't
so
there.
it's just to discern. But that was the best time, is that when I felt like I was dying, which opened me up for a new path. And that was the shamanic path. And I've done so many soul retrievals on people to see that many of their issues have very little to do with this lifetime. It's about other lifetimes. It's about their experiences, things that they are unconsciously toting around.
Oh, very, very true. And I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I'm not sure why this keeps coming forward so strongly, that I felt like your big move was like you moving into a new lifetime. It's like you could have stayed in Florida the rest of your life and there would have been nothing bad about it. You know what I mean?
No.
You would have given to people, you would have stayed with family and friends and been happy, but your soul was like, I want more. I want more. And so I think that's so important that we listen to that voice and we do move. But yes, you're absolutely right. So much of the issues that we are dealing with today are not even of this lifetime, and the deeper work will bring that forward and also help us heal. And, there was one Unity church I was going to talk about reincarnation, and right before I went to speak, they changed my title because they were scared of it. And I said, I've never had that happen before. And I said, and I don't like it. and I said to them, so did you know that like over half of your congregation guaranteed is already reading about, thinking about, wondering about reincarnation, and that it is in fact a Unity teaching. Yeah, the Fillmores, right? we were called to Eastern Christianity. And there's a big aspect of unity that's scared about it. But when you know the soul is eternal, it just makes sense. It's like not a stretch. So anyway, we did come to an agreement finally with with that individual church. And he said very simply, I honestly didn't know how much the Fillmores had taught about it. I'm embarrassed. I changed your title, by the end.
Gosh.
So there we are. But you're right that so much of the things that are holding us back are not even this lifetime, and they're unconscious, and therefore informing us unconsciously of behaviors, our reactions, etc. I feel like it's like that glass ceiling we can't seem to break through,
Well, so much of it, in my humble opinion, is that, Unity and Science of Mind trained people to represent them, just like a college or education. It's a very dated paradigm. Let's get you in here. Let's have you show up. Let's have you check in, attend so many days, and let's have you learn about everybody else. Very little about yourself. And so we produce and we keep producing the same results. We have people, depending on who taught them, they only go as that far. They probably never read or explore very little of anything else. And they just quote other people, whereas the real essence is, and that's where you and I differentiate, is the fact that that's a big word to say that early in the morning, differentiate. I pulled it off.
Differentiate.
But is that you and I have presented the mystery school. Yeah. And that's the difference. And that's why I love tapping into Yogananda, because he was 17 years old and teaching mystery schools all across India before he came to the States. That's what it's all about. And that's why today that we have so many young people that are killing themselves, and they are 10 to 17 years old, because every generation is more evolved. And when they're fitting in an old, dated paradigm that's unwilling to change whatsoever, and if anything, it's going backwards, they don't fit, because evolution is being stagnated. So
it is. And really countrywide, countrywide, the church, what we call church attendance, is down. But what's so interesting is the spirituality has never been more present. So I think as leaders, if we, are stuck, as you say, in this old paradigm, we're really going to miss the younger generation and even miss the joy and the evolving we're trying to do ourselves. We're gonna miss that. And you and I have both mentored, a lot of ministerial students. And I was working with some students, one time I had 11 ministerial students in my church at the same time. And I was doing a mini workshop with them, and they were working on their talks, and I was having them do a talk, and it was so far from what would inspire anybody. And one of them quoted Carl Jung, and I said, okay, so after the talk, I said, so tell me your relation to Carl Jung. How do you know about Carl Jung? And they said, well, I did a search on the internet. And I said, it shows. because you misused that quote and you don't understand the context of what you're saying. So as a speaker and as a minister, don't talk about it if you don't have the background knowledge. Like just looking up a quote, no. So, and that's what you and I are talking about, living it from the soul. And, I happen to love Carl Jung, studied him for years, done workshops and deep, deep work, and read and listened. And, only a few times a year will I quote Carl Jung, because the fact is, it's so deep. It's hard to take a pithy quote and it makes sense.
Right. Exactly.
Right. But what you're saying about, staying, about actually, our process being alive, living from soul. And, that was missing in their whole educational piece. It's like they'd never heard that rather than just picking a quote that happens to go with the topic, they needed to have some connection to it.
Well, we live in a culture of even like unto unity, as much as the concept is be original, be your own Christ, exceed what a Christ consciousness has ever done. They're
Right.
still unaware that they're thrown in the throes of religiosity.
Oh,
I mean,
yes,
the
absolutely.
number one printed book that they have, they will not even say they have centers or communities because at the time that they told me this, the largest subscribers are the Baptists. So when you have a philosophy and you won't even stand up for it because you're concerned about what people think of you, how is that supposed to be? We have too
We've got a long
many,
way to go.
like you, I've had ministerial students tell me that I only can talk at a certain level because my community is at a certain level. And I go, wow, now that's like full of yourself right there.
Totally.
You have no idea who's in your community or what they've done or what global traveling they've done or if they sat with the Dalai Lama and wrote a book. How do you know? Well,
Right.
that means you have 15 people in your community. That must be how you know. But how would you know otherwise? I'm going to speak at a certain level. Whatever happened to downloading what the Spirit wants you to experience?
Exactly. Well, our mutual friend
Oh,
Edwene Gaines, one of
God,
my,
yes.
I know, love her. One of my favorite things I've ever heard her say about ministry and about our work as spiritual teachers is she said, it was at a minister retreat. Somebody asked a question. And she said, listen, you're overthinking this. She said, your job is to go sit on a rock until you have a spiritual experience and then come back and tell everybody about it. Like, that's the job. She goes, that's the job. And it's so true. It is so true. It is so true. And the thing I we haven't even talked about, maybe we'll do this next time, Temple, because we're running out of time not running out of time, but we're coming to the end of our time together today is, the great work through ILI and the Institute and, how many lives that's changing. So, but before we let you go today, is there anything you want to tell us about coming up in 2023? Like, how do we find out where you are and what you're doing since you have moved? I know you have your personal website and you're also working with the church there in Santa Barbara. So how can our listeners find out more about what you're up to in the coming weeks and months?
I think the easiest way is always through my website, which is my name, Temple Hayes.
Yep,
Yeah,
templehayes.com.
Keep it simple, and on that website they can access the Institute and the shamanic teachings that I do and the shamanic healings and those kind of things, because I can Zoom with people and do all over the world. I haven't even gotten to tell you about this new community in Kenya that I'm working with, and I want to see about you being part of that somehow.
Oh, well, thank you. I have been connected to a community in Uganda, interestingly.
Oh, great.
And
are we surprised? We're so parallel.
I know that keeps happening. So yes, I'd love to talk to you. It's really a lifelong dream for me to go to Africa. I have a couple of dear friends in South Africa as well. And I was speaking to her recently. We had done some educational courses. I was taking some courses to be what's called an archetypal pattern analyst. I told you a little bit about that. And that's where I met her. And she's an amazing teacher. And she's been on the show with us as well. She works with corporations worldwide and helping them see their patterns and healing them. I mean, she's really, really cool. She'd definitely be somebody you might want to meet and talk with. But she's invited me and said, if you come, I'll go with you to Uganda. So she said, if you come this far, there's really no, even though Uganda is like, whole day away,
Right.
Everybody thinks Africa is like these little villages. It's like, it's
Massive.
These countries. Yeah, it's massive. So, but I would love to talk to you about that. I've always felt like that the U.S., the view we have in the U.S. of Africa is very limited and limiting, and that with a little work and a little support, things could be changed on a profound level with people understanding the part they play in creating their lives. I did, when you've been so pressed down and so subjugated for so many years, it's hard to know what the options even are. In this country, we're so spoiled, right? But there's a minister there in Uganda who followed me for a long time, and he and his wife, they help hundreds of kids all the time, and they have a ministry, and his wife is a nurse, and they want me to come and work with the parents and the kids. And then I was going to take a medical team with me as well. So I had a few people lined up to do it. And then COVID hit. So we haven't been able to regroup since COVID, but it is definitely a goal of mine to go down. So anyway, talk more about that. Yeah. But yeah, definitely want to hear more about that. And Temple, thank you so much. There are so many things that you're doing right now. Like you say, it could be an 8-hour show. We didn't even really get much to the depth of the Yogananda stuff, but that Yogananda dance, I bet it'll be available online for people to at least find out about. And again, going to your website, templehayes.com. So friends, I hope you have enjoyed today's show. I know you have with Temple Hayes. Just a global spiritual leader, difference maker, author. She's just all around cool person. So glad you've had us along with you today. And we're always grateful for your prayers, for your support, and for your love, and always for your financial support, because it's through your generous support that we are on the air bringing you this show. And we are around the world in over 90 countries worldwide. And we are, 200,000 downloads, friends. So thank you for your generosity and your support. And we'll see you next week. And blessings on the journey, dear friend.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2023, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.